Hello, let's talk about the build panel in Volumator. So this is where we build and regenerate volumes, and it's the panel that will be presented to you when you open up Volumator for the first time. There's 3 ways to build a volume in Volumator. Let's look at the first one, piloting mode. So we're going to build a volume for this area here. Let's start by flying down into the area, and we're just going to press the Start Build Piloting button. And now we're literally going to pilot the camera around until we've done a full circuit of the area, focusing on the perimeter. And we have this convenient little start icon here that tells you where the beginning is so that you can see when you've done a full circle. Up here, it will tell us how many detected points it's found. And when we're ready, we just press the Stop Building button. And after a short period, we've got our perfect volume. Now, this is a super easy volume. So let's have a look at something a little bit more complicated. This area here is a bit of a concave shape, which is a little harder for the system to deal with. But again, we're going to start build piloting. We're going to fly around. And you'll see the little pink dots as areas get detected. And when we're finished, we press the Stop Building button, and there we go with our volume. Now, this is great and everything, but wouldn't it be nicer if we didn't have to do the piloting ourselves? And that's where the second mode comes in, which is the drone mode. So I'm going to delete that. We'll come back down. So now we're going to find a point in the middle of the area, and we're just going to press the Start Build Drone button. And we can see the drone flying around, bashing into stuff and detecting the area. And as you can see, it's a much faster way of building volumes, and it means you don't have to fly around. Just to give you a quick insight into how the drone works, you can see as it flies around detecting geometry, it never actually hits the geometry, it kind of slows down and navigates the space. Volumator can handle all sorts of shapes. So here's an example of an L shape here, which is a different geometrical challenge, or a U shape here, and even complicated shapes like this one, with loads of concave sections and acute angles. Let's look at this circle here for our regeneration tests. So I'm just going to come down and build it here. And we can see it's done an incredibly good job of building the space. But now the problem is this is very curved space, and so the volume is also curved, and the complexity may just be too high for you here. And so what we can do is simplify the volume in order to make it suit our needs. So this is where regeneration comes in. And with regeneration, we can change the settings that are used to make up the shape. And the main one here that we have is resolution. And this determines how detailed and how defined, how complicated the shape is. It's in Unreal units, and it determines the filtering of points that go up to make the volume shape. So it's currently made at 200, and you can see that here with a little readout when we generate volume. And we can increase this and regenerate using the existing volume that we have selected. And what that does is it takes the volume data that was stored in the component here and it rebuilds the volume. So you don't have to do the detection again. It just does the regeneration part and it overwrites the volume. The actor stays the same. It's just the volumes brush that gets updated. So if I click regenerate, you can see that the volume is more simple, and we can even see these little icons here. And what these represent are detected areas that have been tested to see if they were still inside the volume. And because we've made the volume coarser and less detailed, and if we look at the top view, we can see that it's cut the corner off here, just as a result of the complexity being lower. And now these points here are no longer inside the volume. So there's a bunch of other fun settings here. We can expand the volume after the fact as well to make sure that it's inflated enough to cover the space. We can also try a different simplification method that uses angle detection to instead filter the points down based on their nearest neighbors. We also have simplify concavities, which will remove some concave areas where it's cutting in a little bit here, like this, so that it always makes it bigger. We can gift wrap volumes to make sure that they cover the whole space, a bit like putting a sheet over it. So there's a ton of stuff, and there's some additional settings in advanced settings as well that you might occasionally want to use too. But there'll be a separate video on all the settings, and also documentation fully covers it with images and stuff like that. Building and regenerating a volume always uses current settings. And so if you want to tweak settings on an existing volume, you want to recall these settings and then regenerate it. So I've got a volume that I made here with different settings, not the defaults. So I'm going to recall, and you'll see that the values have updated here. And now I can regenerate and it won't change. And I can just tweak what I like, regenerate and see how it's different. Or I can come over to this one that was made again with different settings, recall these, and now it's updated my settings. So if I regenerate it, it won't have changed. And so that means you can come into an old map with a volume that was made with totally different settings and then recall these settings so that you can then tweak them as needed. One of the main settings is the mode here. Currently, at the time of making this video, there's only 2. Perimeter is the classic mode that I've already been discussing, but voxel mode works in a completely different way, and it puts everything into a voxelized grid and then uses giant voxel blocks to build the volume, and you'll see the difference here. So it creates a blockier shape, but the advantage to the system is that not only does it ensure that every point that was detected is covered, we can also better cover areas that are spikier and have really deep concaves. Let me just show you an example of that. So this shape is perfect for the voxel mode. The deep concave shapes here and the really sort of spikiness and the little hook that comes in here, it's very difficult for the perimeter system to build these correctly, whereas the voxel system loves this. You need to make sure that the area is fully detected, which is a bit challenging with this because it's difficult for the drone to get in and out, but as you can see here, it's built it really well and it's ensured that every space has been covered. And again, one of the great things about the voxel mode is that it has no warnings and errors. Every single thing is always covered. So it's very safe, but it just means that you may have a bit of overlap. And you can tweak this with a resolution setting. And the validation system works a little differently, but I'll probably make a separate video of this or be in the settings video, and I'll go into more details then. Just a last point about that, you can actually switch between perimeter and voxel mode after the fact as well. So here we have a volume made with perimeter mode. I can just switch to voxel mode, regenerate, and there it is. And we can put it back again, and we can tweak settings, and then we can try changing it over to voxel, and change the setting again. So you have total freedom, and you're not tied to any one thing. So since making that last section of the video, I've added a new generation mode called 2-pass mode. This is similar to perimeter, but it does a couple of passes on perimeter finding with point ordering in between. The gist of it is that it's less prone to creating buggy volumes. So if we have a look at this perimeter mode volume and we increase the resolution, you can see that it's having difficulty with these very concave sections here. All this stuff is pretty poor. I mean, this is quite an unusual volume shape, so it's not common to have these kind of problems, but it can happen. So if I switch over to 2-pass mode, regenerate, and then go back through those bad problem ones, they're all working just fine. Whereas if I switch to perimeter mode and then regenerate that, you can see we've got problems here. So it's got a much better chance of getting bug-free volumes. The downside is that it's more prone to warnings and lower complexity. So in this case here, we have a perimeter version with 33 warnings. If I switch it over to 2-pass, now has 48. So it has more warnings, and that's because it's slightly less accurate. It also takes slightly longer to generate too, so if you're using the validation mode, this can compound a little, but it's pretty negligible. So it may be that you want to use this as your default, depending on how often you're running into those kind of buggy volumes. So far, we've been talking about piloting and drone modes, and both of those prioritize the detection of geometry when they're building things. But what happens if there isn't any geometry, or there's only limited geometry and you still want to cover the space? And we have two options here. Firstly, we can use piloting mode rather than drone mode, and that will take into account your flight path when you're detecting the space, like this. We're going to fly out over here, and there's obviously no detection of geometry here. We're going to press the stop button, and the volume has been built taking into account the flight path that I used. But there may be times where you want more specific control over where the points are, and again, there isn't necessarily geometry there. And so that's where we come to our third build mode, and that's the Vertices Only mode. And that's where you can set very explicit vertices on your volumes. So rather than being continually scanning, instead what we do is we start the mode, and then we will fly around, and we will literally say where we want each point to be. So we're going to add a point here, add another vertex here, add one on the end, somewhere in the middle here I'm going to add one, and now you can start seeing where the points are and the lines between them. And then we're going to add a last one here. When we go to finish building, it will close the loop, and so it will connect up to the first one we made. And so there you can see it's a very different style of making volumes, but it's being very explicit with where you want those points to be. So it's a little bit more manual work because you have to add the individual vertices, but you're not restricted to geometry or the detection of geometry when you want to build your volume. So it's great for outdoor spaces or areas where you don't want to use the geometry to determine the space. And just finally on the validation system at the bottom here, there's going to be a separate video on this, but as just a quick overview, when you generate any volume, you will see a list of warnings and errors that the system has detected. The validation system will iteratively rebuild the volume with slightly tweaked settings, trying to reduce the warnings and errors down to your thresholds. There's some settings in here that you can tweak to change the strategy that it uses and where your thresholds are. So let's say in this case, this volume has 3 warnings. It's quite simple to use because we can just enable the system, specify our thresholds here, and then regenerate the volume, and it's going to rebuild it a number of times until it gets to whatever your thresholds are. So this volume now has 0 warnings and errors. Whereas if I was to disable it, it would just generate it and it would have whatever warnings and errors. With it enabled, rebuilds it a number of times until it beats the threshold. It effectively automates the process of tweaking the settings to get the absolute perfect volume.